Hello, lovely people, and welcome. Today I am returning to the mini canvases. I did a video on this before, a month or so ago, where I did a dramatic red sunset with a silhouette of a bridge in front of it. So this time I'm returning to sunset, but instead of doing the dramatic red one, I wanted a more calm kind of purple-based one. And I've been thinking a bit about desert landscapes and kind of barren landscapes lately, and I decided I'd wanted to try try my hand at doing a more barren, deserty kind of landscape. So after I put in my sunset sky, I dried it off with a hairdryer and waited for it to get completely dry. And then I started to try to lay in the foreground. And for the foreground, I'm mainly working with a yellow ochre, and a black. All my paints in this are from Golden's. They're the Golden Fluid Acrylic paints. So they go down fairly smoothly. They're easy to spread out with a paintbrush, and I enjoyed that very much. So I started by laying in a little bit of the kind of horizon line of mountains, and I added a little more later. And then I started thinking about how to lay in the foreground. And basically what I went through with this was doing a whole bunch of layers. Much of my painting is worked in layers. And just kind of guessing at what would work and what wouldn't. I started by putting in a lighter color, darkened it up, tried to give it some texture to start with, and then after doing that, I went in with basically my highlights and my shadows. So I started with a mid-tone, and as I developed it, I worked in more and more of the lights and the shadows, and tried to make the landscape look like the kind of dry earth you see in some barren areas. So starting very generally here, not with much with the details, trying to get the basic shapes and the basic contours, the topology of the landscape in before I went in and tried to do any details. I tried to work in a little bit of the sunset colors into the paint here so that some reflection would feel like it was happening. So you can see over there I used a little of the magenta in the bright spots here to try to make it look like the landscape and the sunset were in fact related. But I also wanted to keep the very dry, earthy color happening there. So, kind of a little of both going on. And after I laid in the main bright areas and the main kind of topography of the area, I then went back in and started to do the more subtle variations in light and dark. And I switched paintbrushes to a much smaller one and put in a bunch of barren plant life. No leaves on it, nothing green, just a lot of dark, kind of stark looking trees and branches. This may not be super realistic. I didn't put in cacti really, but I very much like how stark it looks and kind of drives home the dry, arid kind of feel for this landscape. And after I put in my trees, I went back and started actually working in details of the ground. I put in those little, erosion marks in the dirt. So these little troughs or gullies working along each of the big main areas behind the trees. And you can especially see the one in the bottom center worked out very well. You can very easily see how that took it from just kind of a shapeless mound and turned it into something much more earthy looking. And that was kind of my goal, was to figure out how this type of landscape worked and how painting it worked, and I think I learned a bunch doing this, and it was certainly interesting to paint. Not your standard pretty scene, a little more, I don't know about dramatic, but definitely a little more stark, which can be dramatic and beautiful in its own way. So, and I think I'll probably do a little more experimenting with doing desert looks, and maybe do more with actual sand dunes as opposed to this type of dry, earthy desert. But this was really, really interesting to do, and felt kind of different, and so I thought it was a lot of fun. So please let me know what you think. Comment below. Let me know what you think. Please like this. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and be well. Thank you so much.